Hey folks, Nick here from Another BookTube channel, and today I'm going to show you how to prepare a single comic book for a hardcover binding. What do I mean by that? What is a single comic hardcover binding? I have an example here. This is a project I recently finished. This is a copy of House of Secrets 92, a facsimile, not the real thing, that I basically took the cover off of because it was damaged, and instead of just keeping it as a coverless comic or throwing it in the garbage, I turned it into this. So I put a hard case on it, cased it in using book cloth on the spine, and a printed copy of the actual cover, front and back, for House of Secrets 92. So I'm going to show you how you can do this very same thing by showing how to prepare a single comic to be hard case bound. This is not going to be a complete tutorial from beginning to end of starting with the comic and then showing the final product. Instead, I'm just going to show you literally the differences in preparing one comic as compared to a set of comics. The reason being, I've already done a complete tutorial like that. Go check my history for a Batman Year One binding, where I show everything, including the building of the case, the application of the spine cloth and the cover, and stuff like that. I'm only going to be showing how to prepare the comic book for this. That being said, we are going to go over just the materials that are going to be needed. So first, you'll need the comic, obviously. You'll need an awl to punch some holes in a little while. Some binder clips or bulldog clips, whatever you want to call these guys. You know them. Just a couple. Some thread and a needle. I have waxed linen thread, which works pretty well. A pencil, because you're going to need to mark some stuff off. It's a bone folder, although this one's not really bone, it's just plastic, but a paper folder of some kind, and a cutting implement. This is a razor blade. I've also got a straight edge cutter as well. You'll also need some pliers, and we'll see why in just a moment. So the comic I'm working with is Secret Origins number 10. This is a terrific issue of a it's just a very underappreciated issue. It's not a key, there's no major first appearances here or anything like that. But this is a great comic book, and I'm going to give it the special treatment here to turn it into a hardcover. So usually when I do this, I'm doing it with comics that have lost their covers or that have damaged covers. This one did have some damage. The top was chewed up really badly. I trimmed it before we got on camera here. So this comic is going to be a tiny bit shorter than usual. And also, I got this for free, so I don't really mind messing it up a little bit. I've also just got my own copy. So the first thing that we have to do here to prepare this is get a sturdy piece of paper to wrap around it. That's going to act as a kind of new cover for this. Now, why do we want that? When I add end papers to this, which is going to be a step that I'll show you a little later, I don't want to have to glue the end papers or tip them on directly on to the actual comic book in here, because then that's going to cut off a little bit of the actual action. I would rather have a piece of paper wrapped around the comic that's also sewn on, and then tip the end paper onto this. This way this gets the glue and the actual comic remains undisturbed. Now, for the purposes of this, I could just leave this cover on. There's no reason to really not to. But again, if you're doing this specifically to salvage a coverless comic, I want to show you what that looks like. The first thing we want to do is just fold this piece of paper in half. First thing, you want a piece of paper that starts bigger than the actual comic book, both length and width-wise. It needs to be double the width of the comic so that when it folds, it can cover the front and the back. I use this drawing paper, Strathmore Drawing, 11 by 14. It's 80-pound paper. That is usually pretty sufficient. It's good, sturdy paper. You're just going to fold it right in half. And you want to be careful that you got your edges lined up really good. Then you take your folder and, there we go. And you push out like that to fold it as much in half as possible. There we go. And that's your first step done. Then you take your comic book, you're going to lay it flat in there, and we have to mark off where the comic actually ends because we got to cut this paper down to size. So let me do that now. You want to make sure that you've got this pinned into the edge, the fold as much as possible. Get it nice and neat in there. And here's where you take your pencil. Mark off where that should be. And I'm going to use a straight edge here, a straight edge cutter. And it's actually going to be a little tricky because I put the mark on the inside, but it's fine. I'll make it work. I could actually see where that mark is, so I'll put it on the outside as well. Okay, fold that down. Nice little cut. Sweet. So that's the first down. And now when I fold it in, it's actually, it's a little tricky because with comic books, I mean, there's no standardized size truly. I mean, there's miscuts when things get printed. There's comics that are taller and shorter than other ones, just naturally, the way that they come off the line. So you just have to be getting as close as possible to the actual dimensions of the specific comic you're working with. And I see here this guy is about that tall. So we'll cut it around there. This doesn't need to be, super perfect. Where'd my mark go? There it is. It just needs to not be terrible. Okay. Like that. All right. And now that's done. So let's see what this looks like. Fold it into there. Yeah, not bad. Sticks out a little bit, but I don't know. Honestly, it doesn't really matter. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is we are going to find the center of the comic. And we just do that by just finding where the staple is. And I think it's on my next page. No? There it is. We got our staples. And we have to take the staples out of here. Honestly, if you want to skip this step, I think you probably could. The reason I choose to take them out is because I just visually, I think it's usually a little ugly to kind of keep the staples in there. I don't like the look of them. I'd rather just see the thread that I've used to sew the spine instead. So I choose to take the staples out. And if you're doing a larger binding, if you're doing multiple comics together, then you are definitely going to want to take the staples out because they just add bulk. I'm also just realizing now that I didn't need to bulldog clip these to do this because I need to actually take the staples out. So ignore that previous step. You're going to go right back to it. But I was getting ahead of myself. And as you can see, just visually, I use these pliers to pop out the staples. Just set those aside. Now you have a delicious snack. That is a joke. Please don't eat staples. Some staples are more stubborn than others. You just have to be careful that you're not damaging the interior comic book when you do this. I'm also going to remove the cover because that's what we talked about. I'm going to remove the cover. We're going to pretend that this was a coverless comic and get rid of that. Now we've got just the interior left, and here is where we want to bulldog clip this together. I'm holding the center fold open so I don't have to find it again. And here we're going to pop those back on. Boom. and boom. Cool. So now what we got to do, these staple holes are not sufficient. We're not going to use those to actually sew. We need to sew these pages back together and include the white paper as part of that as well. This is where your awl comes in. So you're going to hold the paper at, I like to hold just the paper straight up. So the paper's at a 90-degree angle, and then you hold your awl, I got to take the protector off, at a 45-degree angle, and try to find the center of the page as best you can. You could just kind of eyeball this. And I'm going to hold it open a little bit more just for illustrative purposes. But just apply a little bit of pressure directly onto where the spine is and press through. And you can see the awl has poked through not just the comic, but the spine of the paper that I folded as well. So we've got that one through. Pull it right back out. Let me adjust this here. Then we have to put 2 holes near the edges, of the comic, about maybe 1.5 inches up from the bottom. We don't want to do it too close to the bottom. I'm going to put the bottom one around like here, so we'll put that one there. Same thing, 45-degree angle, slight pressure to create that one, and about up here, slight pressure, just like that. See? Boom. And now we need 2 more holes that basically just split the holes that we created already. So halfway between this one and this one, that's about there. Pop that through. And halfway between there and there. It's actually right around where the staple was, but that staple wasn't on the spine. This was a poorly stapled comic, so I'm still going to put in a new hole beneath it right there. So I have a more defined hole. And that's it for your awl. You could pack that up. Okay, and now we are ready to sew. We're going to take our wax linen thread and we're going to try to peel off probably about just like twice the length of the comic. So about there. Let me cut that. Yeah. Boom. For your needle, I don't know if this is going to show up too well, but you want like a decent sized eye on that needle, but the needle eye shouldn't be too much wider than the actual needle point. You don't want to be creating a bigger hole as you're threading it through. Ooh, look at that. First try through the eye. So quick trick here to get your thread attached to the needle is pull the thread through about twice the length of the needle, and then use the needle to just pierce the thread itself. Try to create like a flat space for yourself. And then, boop, I've got the needle going through the thread, and then pull that up to the eye, pull it through, and then boom, you got yourself a snug threaded needle. And now we come to the sewing portion. This is a lot of fun, especially when you're working on a larger set. This is like where you can put on some music and zen out. Like this is the most relaxing part of bookbinding. You're going to start at the middle hole that you created. You're going from the outside in first, and you're just going to find what you created there. And you can see, boom, it's coming through the hole that I created. And you're going to pull that through, but you're going to make sure you leave a little bit of a tail at the end. That's going to be really important for the end. You're going to need to tie this off. So don't pull your thread all the way through, and be mindful of that as you continue on. You're going to go down to the next hole that you created, which I think that's this one here. Yep, I'm going to pull that through. And make sure it doesn't bunch up on you. So sometimes my thread does that. And once it gets nice and snug, make sure you're pulling on the other end. You're not pulling your thread all the way through. Now you go down to the next hole, put it back in through the outside. Sometimes if your hole gets misaligned, maybe the pages get jostled, it's a quick trick is just to go back in from the inside again. So now I've kind of reestablished where that hole is. And now I can go back in. If I have better hand-eye coordination. There we go. Yes, that's how we do it. That's how we do it. Okay, pull that through. Come on. Great. Pull it snug, pull it tight to the spine, but don't over pull it, because then that's how you rip your comic and you ruin the project before you've even really got started. Keep this snug here. Then you're going to go back in through the next hole up. So you're going back into the one you've already sewn, but now from the other side, pull that through. And this is where things start to get snug and they stop moving, which is good. And when you come back through, you're going to skip the middle hole. You're going to go to your second top hole. All right. Pull it snug again. Just like that. Then you go back out through the top hole. All right. Back in through the second top hole. And then finally, you finish up by going back through the center hole out that way. I'm going to try to snug all this stuff back up a little bit, because you want to try to keep, you'll be able to see the sewing on the inside. You want to try to keep that kind of nice and tight. So keep pulling it as you go, all the way through to the end. All right, so now that that's through, you can still see the, the old staple holes. It's not going to be perfect. You get better at it the more you do. And certain comics, depending on how old they are and how brittle the pages are, you're going to have bad luck. Stuff's going to kind of rip on you. It's not your fault, and don't let it like detract from how much you like your finished piece. I personally couldn't care less. I just love the joy of putting something together myself like this. So you've got two tails sticking out from the center hole, and you're just going to do just like a simple like loop knot. I don't know what it's actually called. I'm bad at knots, but just fold it over like that. Boom, like the first step in tying your shoes, basically. And then you do that same kind of knot again, just to get nice and big. Yeah, there you go. Now, if you take the bulldog clips off, you've got yourself a comic book with a nice white cover on the front and the back. You can cut your tails a little bit, not too close to the knot, but this will also keep things nice and clean during the case-in process. And there you go. We're going to move on to end papers now. Okay, so for end papers, we're going to use a slightly different type of paper for this project. I'm not going to just use white paper again. You can. And also, I guess I should have mentioned this. When you're doing this white paper on the outside, you can also make your own like title page, which is a great idea. I didn't do it for this because it's, a lot. This is just kind of a tutorial. But if you wanted to just design something in Canva or whatever, you could put the actual like Phantom Stranger logo here. This way you have a title page when it opens up. It's not just blank. Same thing for end papers. If you want to create like decorative end papers, you can do so. In this case, I am just going to use plain blue because I know that my main cover is going to be yellow. And I think that that's going to be a good little like offsetting color situation. But preparing the end papers is pretty much the same as we did for the outer paper that we created. I'm going to just take my paper and fold it in half. Fold that down. And then I bring my text block back up and mark things off just as I did with the white piece of paper, just to see where this needs to be cut. So I can do this all at once here. Got to cut there. I got to cut there. All right, so let's do this one first. If you are serious about bookbinding, if you don't want to just have this be a one-off project, I recommend getting one of these like straight edge cutters. They're really, really helpful. I mean, you could just go the straight razor route, but the more straight razoring you do, the more likely you are to hurt yourself, which is something that happened to me very early in my binding career. Okay. Discard the scraps. And now we're just going to check to make sure that it actually lines up with our front piece of paper, and it does. I actually think it's a little long. Nah, actually, yeah. It's tough because the text block itself is a little crooked just because of the way the comic was printed. So it is a little bit too wide. I'm going to snip off a little bit of that end. Better to cut long the first time. You can't add paper back, but you can take more off. Cool. Alrighty. There we go. Cool. Perfect. So then what we do is where we get our glue. Oh, I forgot to mention the glue earlier. I guess I didn't realize I was going to be going this far into it. But the glue that you want to use for bookbinding is pH neutral, PVA. If it specifies that it's good for bookbinding, for paper projects, that's what you want. Don't use Elmer's glue. Right. Get some of this glue going. And you want to put a layer of PVA glue down onto the edge, the spine of your end paper. Good. I think maybe 3 millimeters, 4 millimeters worth of space towards the end there. And hold down some scrap over it so you can just apply it this way. Make sure you're always brushing away from the scrap paper. Don't brush in, because that's how you get glue beneath your actual scrap piece. Counterproductive. And make sure you have scrap underneath it as well to be catching the excess. So there's that. Boom, get a nice clear line. Scooch that over and place your end paper down. Line it up, tip those edges on. Actually, still, it's a little bit too tall, but again, it doesn't matter a ton. There we go. Try to get it as close to the edge as possible. You may have to kind of press on it and fold it down. So just hold it for a little bit, and that should take care of it nicely. PVA dries really, really quickly, so you should be ready to move on to the next step in under a minute. Mark down on the front of your end paper which end paper it is. So this is the front, and I'm going to put a little up arrow so that I know. I don't have to go and open the comic every time. I know that if I just grab this, I can see, oh, this is the front, and this is up. This is the right orientation for it. So there you go. That's tipping on the end paper now. You do the same thing for the back, exact same thing. And that's where this tutorial ends, because like I said, at this point, it's just building the case, designing the case, and casing the text block into that case. So the word case a lot there. And I have a tutorial on that already. Check out the Batman Year 1 tutorial. That's where you can see those steps fully. Some high-level tips on what I do for the actual case. I do put, for the spine stiffener, you measure it the same way that you would a regular bookbinding project. I think it usually comes out to about 4 or 5 millimeters in spine thickness. This spine stiffener on this project, I believe, was 7 millimeters. I do a 7 millimeter hinge gap. Or did I do 8? Yeah, it's up to you. 7, 8, or 9 millimeters. I've worked with all those hinge gaps, and I've had success with all of them. The actual width of the spine page, the spine cloth, it depends on what your preference is. I like to go about maybe like a quarter of an inch. How far is that? Let me see. So I like to go a little less than an inch into the cover board, because what I want to do is I want to leave as much space possible for the cover design. As you can see, you already have to kind of shrink it a little bit to make it fit. The proportions of comic covers are specific to that size, and your case is going to be naturally larger than an actual comic. So you have to make some concessions, or if you ever find a way to get around this, leave a comment, let me know. I would love to know how. I get the original cover and back cover high-res scans online, and I print them out. I get this done at FedEx. I have it printed on 87-pound glossy cardstock, so it's nice and sturdy. That's why you can see it has a nice like shine to it, and it's durable. That's what you kind of want out of this. This is what the finished product would look like. Oh, I of course, like, add end bands as well. So like this one has green end bands up there. That's all mentioned in the tutorial, the full tutorial that you could find on my channel. There you go. That's how you prepare a single comic for hardcover binding. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. Thank you very much for spending some time with me today. But now it's time to get back to binding comics.